The Terrifier film series is one of the most unlikely independent horror success stories of the last 25 years. Made originally for just 35 grand, the franchise has exploded into a multi-million dollar property spawning sequels, merchandise, theatrical re-releases, and a devoted international fan base. But now, one of the actresses who helped make the first film says she was exploited, underpaid, mistreated on set, and forced into a nude scene without the consent required under the Screen Actors Guild contract. Her lawsuit doesn't just accuse the producers of unpaid royalties and fraud, it exposes a core issue in film and television production: the legal requirements for filming nudity and simulated sex, and the mandatory use of a nudity writer. I'm Scott Hervey, a partner with the law firm of Weintraub Tobin, and I'm joined today by my partner, Matt Sugarman. We are going to talk about nudity writers, SAG-AFTRA's protections for performers, and what the Cochrane lawsuit teaches us on today's installment of The Briefing.
Scott, let's start out with the lawsuit, what Katherine Cochrane alleges.
Yeah, let's do that.
In October of 2025, the actress Katherine Cochrane filed a 16-page federal complaint in the Central District of California against the producers of the Terrifier film. Her complaint makes allegations about unsafe working conditions, but hanging upside down, shackled by her ankles for hours in below freezing conditions with only minimal safety precautions. According to the complaint, she later suffered cranial swelling and eardrum damage. But what we are going to talk about today is her allegation that the producers filmed her nude without a SAG-required nudity writer. The complaint alleges that Cochrane was never given a nudity writer, that she was told the scene required full frontal nudity, which she refused. She ultimately performed the scene topless. The scene was filmed without her signing a nudity writer in violation of the SAG-AFTRA requirements. The complaint states that any nude images or footage filmed without a valid nudity writer are de facto non-consensual under the SAG Basic Agreement, which every producer that uses SAG talent has to sign and agree to the terms of.
Right. Hey, before we continue on, Matt, have you seen this film, the Terrifier film?
I have not.
Oh, neither have I. That should we've now field trip. We're gonna have to go. We're gonna have to see it. All right, let's continue on here. So the SAG Basic Agreement says that without written consent depicting the exact extent of nudity and the extent of physical contact required in any scene, any nude footage is considered obtained without the performer's consent. And Cochrane also alleges that during the creation of her body cast, one of the producers took nude still photos of her, also against her consent and without consent.
And later sold merchandise featuring those images, also without her consent, Scott.
Okay. So those are the three, at least related to nudity. Those are the three things, the three bad acts that the producers did. There are, believe me, other bad acts that are alleged in this complaint. But as it relates to the SAG nudity writer, it's those three things. One is that the nude scene was filmed without a nudity writer, that in the making of her body cast, one of the producers took nude still photos of her without her consent, and that these images were used in merchandise related to the production, also without her consent and without a nudity writer. All right. So the SAG-AFTRA Basic Agreement contains longstanding protections for performers asked to appear nude or engage in simulated sex. Those protections were significantly strengthened in 2020 and the 2023 negotiations. So let's unpack exactly what SAG requires here.
So the first one, Scott, is notification and prior written consent, which is mandatory. A producer must notify a performer of nudity or simulated sex acts expected in a role prior to an audition, if it's known at the time, because scripts can be rewritten later on, and then they would have to inform them at that time. So a producer must also notify the performer of any modesty garment audition, showing up in something that would cover them like lingerie or, a nude bra or nude covering that blends in and looks like nudity. It and if it's known prior to the audition or once it's known, they then have to disclose that. The information must be provided in the casting notice for the role, again, if known at the time. And if the role has already been cast and a producer then learns of expected nudity or simulated sex acts, they are required to then notify the performer as soon as practical.
Right. The SAG basic agreement requires basically advance written consent that has to be obtained before any filming. This consent is obtained through the nudity writer. SAG rules require that the writer be provided to the performer at least 48 hours prior to call time on the day a scene is to be shot. Now, if the role was cast less than 48 hours prior to the call time, or if the producer has engaged someone to replace another performer less than 48 hours prior to the call time, this time frame can be waived. However, in all situations, the producer must provide the proposed written writer at the earliest practical time before production, ensuring that the performer is not like pressured into agreement.
Right. And part of that notification is a description of what the scene requires. The writer must be specific about what's required in the scene. It must specify the extent of nudity and the type of physical contact. And the final depiction must reflect what the performers agreed to. The producer also has to advise the director and the line producer of the parameters of the writer to ensure that the scene gets filmed and it reflects what the writer described. Once consent is given, producers cannot materially expand or change the level of nudity. I would imagine that they could make it lesser, but they couldn't increase it. And if the change occurs, they must again obtain written consent.
Right. I'm going to say, because we represent a lot of producers and production companies and studios, uh, and these nudity writers, like they're negotiated in excruciating detail, and they really should be. I think that's the best way to protect both the artist and the producer, so that it's really clear like exactly what is being required, and there's no surprises for anybody.
Right. And there are some actors who are much more comfortable with it than others are, but based on what the SAG agreement says and how this works, you have to go according to what they will agree to if you want them in that role.
Exactly, right. So the writer also has some standard language for how the footage can be used. So generally, we see prohibitions on the reuse of intimate scenes outside of the episode and or outside of the film, like the use of footage in advertising or promotional material and the use in bloopers and outtakes. Those generally are all like off the table and expressly prohibited in the writer.
Right. And when they're filming the scene itself, there's a requirement that there be a closed set. SAG rules require this during rehearsal or performance of any scenes that involve nudity or sex scenes, meaning that only essential personnel can be present. And that's truly essential personnel.
Yeah.
Monitors should only be viewed by essential members of the production, and unauthorized still photography is absolutely prohibited. A robe or other cover up must be provided to any performer in the nude or wearing a modesty garment when they are on set but not rehearsing or shooting the scene.
Right. And let's be clear, the performer has the right to withdraw consent once given. So let's talk about what happens in that situation if a performer revokes consent. If an actor gives consent and then revokes it, which they can do, the producer is entitled to use a body double or a digital technology, but only within the limits of the consent that was already given. So these rules exist for the precise kinds of issues that are raised in Cochrane's lawsuit. Filming nudity without adhering to these contractual obligations is not just a SAG violation, but it also may open the door to civil liability for privacy violations, sexual exploitation, and fraud. Plus, I think, Hollywood is a small town. And I don't know, this is kind of yucky conduct, and I think most talent and talent agents are going to be a little reticent to deal with a producer who is accused of doing stuff like this. That's my thought.
That if the performer withdraws their consent to be able to do something, it gives the producer another avenue to use so that they don't have to delay or incur amazing expenses to because of that withdrawal. It gives them that ability to use a body double, so it won't interrupt the whole production.
Right. No, absolutely. But I don't know. Do you agree with me, Matt? Do you think that the alleged conduct is kind of like that this would be something that talent reps would look at and think about before they have any of their talent agree to sign on to a project by these producers?
Yes, as you said, as big as Hollywood looks to the outside observer, it's actually a small community and people talk. And any producer who gets a reputation for not only this, something like this, but also yelling or treating people badly will find it hard to get people to come onto the roles on their next project.
Yeah, I mean, especially for independent films where you're paying them like peanuts.
Correct.
Um, all right. Why don't we talk about intimacy coordinators, Matt?
Let's do it. So while it's not required under SAG rules, it's generally a good idea and probably could have avoided the problems in the Cochrane case.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. An intimacy coordinator, they really act as like a liaison between the actor and the production. We've we've some of the shows that I've been on have used them, and I have found that they are incredibly helpful in getting a hyper detailed description of the scene. And I think, as I said, it's necessary in order to ensure evidence of informed consent.
Sure. And I agree with you, Scott. And the important part here with these intimacy coordinators is you have to be able to trust them as well. And I believe there's a process through SAG where there is some training and the people have to be approved and on the approved list from SAG that people can pick off of to use the intimacy coordinators for their productions.
Yeah, yeah, I think that I agree there. All right, let's talk about um, how the writer, how a nudity writer could have fixed some of the problems in this case. So when you look at the allegations in the complaint through the lens of what a proper writer requires, the gaps are pretty clear, right?
Correct. Number one, no written consent. Number two, no written description of what the scene required. Number three, the closed set rules were allegedly violated. Number four, still photos were allegedly taken during a vulnerable moment.
And number five, footage and images were allegedly reused on merchandise.
Correct. And if those allegations are true, this isn't just a SAG compliance issue. It potentially exposes the producers to claims for violation of California statute on non-consensual distribution of sexually explicit material, as well as fraud and breach of contract.
Yeah, that's an interesting part of the complaint, Matt, and I think um, one that we'll see. The statute that is alleged is like the revenge porn statute. Um, and so like we'll see if in fact the failure to comply with SAG rules uh, equals a violation of California's anti-revenge porn statute.
Oh,
It's interesting. If the case doesn't settle, we'll see how this plays out. But
this could
I
be one of those things, Scott, that prompts our legislator in California to come up with new laws because often cases like this lead to our government in the state where entertainment is such a big part of the economy to change the laws to deal with situations that they hadn't thought of before.
Yeah, possibly. Or maybe the revenge porn statute does address this. But I gotta say, like, kudos to the plaintiff's lawyer for figuring out a pretty um, unique angle for the case. All right, so let's cover the takeaways. So I think for producers, even producers of independent, low budget films, the lesson is simple. A nudity writer isn't just a good idea, and it isn't just a formality. It's a legal requirement with substantial consequences for noncompliance.
Right. And for performers, this case is a reminder that you have significant protections. You have the right to know exactly what will be filmed. You can say no, that's a big one, and you can require clarity. And you can also revoke consent, as we discussed.
And if there is no nudity writer, then legally, under the SAG basic agreement, there is no valid consent. And that's not only a problem for producers, but that's also a problem for the distributor and the anybody else in like the chain related to distributing or showing that program, that project, that film, whatever it may be. Well, thanks again to my co-host, Matt. Always great to have your insights. And thank you, our listeners, for joining us on the briefing. If you found this episode helpful or interesting, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and share it with your network. We'd also love to hear from you. So leave a comment or a review. And if you know what topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please let us know. I'm Scott Hervey. I'll see you next time on the briefing.